So, hi there, everybody. My name's Sandy Casella with Casella Homes Real Estate, and today I'm talking to Dee Lifshitz. And what we're going to talk about is moving with pets. So Dee and I were discussing this a little while ago, and I thought this would be a really good idea for people to get some ideas. And I'll give a little intro about what Dee does, and then Dee, I'll get you to just kind of tell me about like your background. The reason we
Sounds
got
good.
on this subject kind of is because Dee and I know each other from a mindset call that we're on. And I was mentioning how every time I get on a Zoom call, my dog right away comes over and like she wants attention and she cries and she won't leave me alone. She was a rescue. And Dee offered to give me some advice and came out and helped me with her. And I'll let her tell her story about what she's doing now and why we think it's relevant. But the tips that she gave me when she came out, like, were so helpful for me with my dog. And I think they would be really helpful for a lot of people, especially when they're moving, because I can't imagine the amount of stress that creates. So Dee, tell us a little bit about yourself, like your transition from what you were doing to what you are doing. And then we'll kind of just have a chat about moving with pets.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for the intro. So I have a family business run with my husband that's dog training, boarding, and daycare. We basically take dogs from just spending the day or spending up to a year, even we've had for different reasons. And sometimes people will bring their dogs when they're moving or just for the day when they need someone to watch them. I've been working with dogs for about 10 years now. Started out with my own dog, of course, and that's how I fell in love with it. And then I moved on after 10 years once I had kids. And, for the last 2 years, I moved into real estate, got my license, and now I'm a real estate agent. But I still very much am involved with the business side of things with doggy basics, taking care of, dogs, training, etc. It's just something I enjoy doing. So, sorry. So when you mentioned that you had an issue with the dog barking and Mepsi enjoying every time you're on a call, I thought, okay, I can definitely help with that. So I'm glad that it did work. Um, the the main thing I think where people have an issue with moving is that even though they prepare for it in advance, they forget that they have a dog. So they don't take usually the time that they need for the dog to adjust and be prepared to lower the stress level and have a smooth move and a transition to the new house because they don't think about it, right? It's you have a lot of things to worry about and the dog sometimes takes the back seat. So that's why this is actually a great talk. I think it's going to be some great pointers.
Yeah. And I think the marriage that you have between being a realtor and your background with pets, I think is huge because I think the stress level is probably huge when people move with a pet. And just maybe I'm sure there's probably a lot of issues that come up for people when they move. Like when I moved here, we had to rip all the carpet out of the house and replace it because she would continually have accidents on the carpet. Accidents. But
Mhm.
and it was so it ended up being in one room, then we replaced it, and then ended up being wherever we had carpet, she kept having these accidents. And she's never done it since we've ripped up the carpet. So I'm sure there's a lot of issues, and there's probably a lot of stress that some dogs have. Well, I think we'll talk primarily about dogs, but I think there's probably a lot of what would be the number one issue about like that you would maybe see after people move with a pet?
Well, ideally, I would start even before the actual move because when you have a lot of things in the house that the dogs are used to seeing on a regular basis, to all of a sudden things start disappearing into boxes and they have no idea what's happening. They see all these boxes starting to pile up as you're packing, and a lot of dogs start to get stressed out right from that moment. No difference than when some owners go away and they pack up a suitcase and then the dog is going, oh my God, what is happening? And, usually before packing, we're usually stressed out. We're a little more anxious because we don't want to forget anything. So they feel our anxiety as well as all these new things that are popping up, again, boxes and whatever else, and things disappearing that they are familiar with, and they can't rationalize it. So that right there is the first point where most dogs will start to get anxious. Not all, some dogs could care less about anything that happens around them, and they're pretty bulletproof. But a lot of dogs need that time to sort of see it and maybe see the box for a while to get familiarized with it and not feel threatened by it. Or, you know, you take the preventative measure and you pack up a box at a time and you put it in a designated room that the dog doesn't have access to. And that way that trigger is not constantly there for them to stress over. So that would be the first thing I would say. What some people do, they just leave it around, and eventually, again, depending on the dog's threshold, they just get used to it, just like anything else that you'd bring home, a brand new TV, you know, a bike, an exercise bike, or anything that wasn't there before. Eventually, they just make do and get it, right?
Yeah.
So it's no longer stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was writing, I'm just writing some notes as you're talking, but how would you identify the stress, and what do you like? I would imagine that most people would know if they have a dog who gets stressed, first of all, right? Like you
Yeah.
probably know if you have, like, I know the things that stress my dog. And so I know if something's going on that she's probably, there may be some stress. So how would you identify that the dog is getting stressed by what's going on?
That's a great question. A lot of people actually confuse the panting, the smiley face, and think that that's a dog that's happy or, you know, excited about something, when it's
Mhm.
actually stress that's showing. But everything is all depending on the context. So typical stress signs you'd see is tail down between the legs. That would be fear, generally speaking. If it's just stress, but not to the extent of absolutely petrified of these boxes or whatever is happening around them, you would see some excessive panting, sometimes drooling from stress, bug eyes. So, like, it looks like their eyes are just about to pop out of their head, a lot of lip licking. So, any of those signs, generally speaking, again, in the context of what's happening around them, could be stress,
Mhm.
and generally would be.
Mhm.
So, you know, what I would probably do is take preventative measures or things that will help them. So, play a game with them around. Um, you know, you don't want to give attention necessarily when the dog is feeling stressed, and you don't want to encourage that behavior by giving the attention in the wrong moment, because they will sort of get stuck potentially in that state. But I would just put a leash on them and walk them around the house, have them sniff and smell, and take their time rather than push them over to a box to force them to sniff it and to get comfortable with it. You can't force these things, but you can help them by guiding them as you're walking. So they will start to trust the situation better, and they'll start to feel more comfortable with what's around them. Otherwise, you might also see, you know, not a lot of dogs, but some, when there's something new in the room, they will sort of like cower away and start to walk around the object from a distance. They won't go near. They'll start to use their nose from way far away. And as they start to feel more comfortable, they get a little more brave at a time and start to go closer and sniff some more. And that's what you want. You want them to use their nose and sort of ease into it rather than just plop the box or push the box against them. So they're forced to interact with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you say then, if you're moving and you have a dog, it's probably best to start the packing process early so that they're
I
getting
would.
used to it, and then maybe having a designated area where you're putting all of the stuff that you're packing, so it's not like, in their space,
Everywhere.
living space.
I would personally. I'd rather take um, the less stressful way for the dog, because you really, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily know what their dog would react like because they've never moved with a dog and this is their first time. So why push them to that extent of being so stressed out? Now, if you're packing a box and your dog could care less about it and they're happy-go-lucky, bum wagging, like
Yeah.
all good, then you probably don't need to do that. You know your dog better than anyone. But if you're seeing that your dog is uncomfortable with it, you can just move it away. Now, I had a client here, funny enough, that the daughter was moving away to university, and it was first child moving out of the house, and the house was in shambles. There were boxes everywhere, suitcases, you name it, because she was going, right? And the dog was so out of sorts that even when she came here just for the day to play, we could sense that there's something off about her. She just wasn't as engaged, and she was like almost like she was freaked out by everything. So of course, when they came to pick up the dog, we said to them, like, is anything going on? Like, did something happen? Is anything going on at home? Not to get personal, but separation, a death in the family, like any of those things can affect a dog. And they said, no, no, no. And I said, is like, are you guys moving something? She said, oh my God, my daughter is moving and I have all these boxes everywhere. I said, well, that would be the reason then. Because otherwise,
Yeah.
the dog, that's not normal behavior. So yeah, it can definitely
Oh,
throw them off.
very
Yeah.
interesting, eh? So what would
Right.
you say is what would you say are some good tips, I think, for um like we've kind of established, so start early with the packing process, maybe move the boxes out to designated spot like the garage and stuff. I would imagine that keeping their routine as normal as possible, if you have a routine, is pretty important, right? Like if they have a daily walk at a certain
Yes.
time, their feeding schedule, that's just, it's probably pretty important to keep that stuff kind of like I guess what
Hmm.
word I just used, it just went out of my brain. Keep everything else the same as much as you can.
Consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it really depends on what your aim is. So, for example, with my own dogs, I don't feed them at the usual time every single day, because then it it builds up an expectancy. So the
Yeah.
one day that you're running late from work by half an hour and your dog is used to having that food at 5 p.m. every single day, well, let me tell you, they know it's 5 p.m. before you knew it was 5 p.m.
Yes.
And
Trust
they
me.
start to pace around and they start to get anxious about their food over time. It becomes their part of their routine. So I actually, from a young age, change it up regularly when I feed, as well as the walking. But I have that ability. A lot of people need to be at work by a certain time. They need to feed, potty, everything by a certain time so they can get out the door. And then I usually say, well, try to at least be a little more flexible, maybe with the dinner time. So they don't expect it always at the same time. And that way, being less rigid with the times, at least on one part of the day, makes it easier for them with transitions. And they wouldn't be so stressed out. If you didn't unpack all the dog stuff by 5 o'clock, you might have to go to the dollar store or to PetSmart to go grab a bowl, or, like their feeding
Yeah.
stuff. So you'd be able to feed them, right? And you don't want to have to do that, and
Yeah.
not have them stressed either, right? So moving usually goes a little sideways with timelines and things take longer. So um, I would say that ties into the moving day itself. I would probably recommend making arrangements for a friend or a family member, a neighbor, someone that you trust, to take care of your dog for a day or two, because it's chaotic when you first get into the house and you got to unpack a few things just to be able to go to sleep and brush your teeth, and have a few things, even just to cook something quickly. So the less stuff you have to worry about would usually be less stressful on you and less stressful on the dog. So when you do bring the dog back in a day later or 2 days later, you have most of their stuff already laid out. Their bed can be out, their food and water bowls, and it's a little bit, familiarity is at least already there. So
Yeah.
that would be the next thing I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
That makes sense. And I think like moving day is always so hectic, like to be, if you're running in the house and, the dog's like doesn't know what's going on, I think that could be an issue, I think, if you have
Absolutely. Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So it makes sense. It
And
makes sense.
yeah, and you made a point in a video that you posted the other day, that movers, when they come in and out and the doors opening and you have all these strangers coming in and out of the house, not only is it risky and dangerous, a dog can just take off. And people who are not dog people, or people that don't have a cat, for example, they're not mindful like that to think about, oh no, I shouldn't keep the door open. I really need to make sure that cat doesn't get out.
Yeah.
So we've heard so many times about dogs getting out of the house, and then the real estate agent has to go out there and try to get this dog back in. And,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, not fun. And
Yeah.
also, with all these people coming in and out of the house, if your dog is not people friendly, that's also dangerous, right? So a little more liability on your end with all these people
Yeah.
coming in and out.
Then
Yeah.
what would you suggest is like the best thing to do once you get into the new house? Now, let's say you've boarded your dog or taken your dog, someone's taking care of it for a few days, and now you're bringing this dog, like you left a certain house, you dropped the dog off somewhere else, and now you're bringing them back to a totally different area. So assuming it's not a dog that's like, some dogs are well traveled, right? Like people take them everywhere, that might be different. But for a dog that's not
Yes.
used to that, that could be probably could be a little bit traumatizing, I would think.
Absolutely. I would start with first having a few of their items already laid out. So there's that smell of them already in the area wherever they would hang out. Um, so having that set up, but also I would not just let them go in and rush into the house, because what you would typically see with a dog that's overstimulated, they're either completely shut down and overwhelmed and they don't want to move, they don't want to do anything, they just kind of freeze, and that's not good. Or they would go inside and you try to be so happy-go-lucky for them to go into the new house because you're happy and excited. And people are like, yay, let's go, and you get them all excited. And what they end up doing is running amok like maniacs all over the house. And you risk them falling, slipping, and sliding on maybe a slippery spot on the stairs or on the hardwood floor or wherever. And
Mhm.
then that spot could actually scar them. If they fall in a certain area, they may not want to walk through that area. So now you're going to have potentially a different problem to deal with. Or if they fell on the stairs, they may be afraid to go up and down the stairs. And now you got to work on that. So that's a little bit more from a preventative stand. But also, when you're walking with them with a leash, you can just take your time and leisurely walk throughout the house the way that you normally would, and just let them sniff and smell and engage their nose to get familiarized with the new environment, which will be less stressful. No different than you going out for a walk in a new neighborhood. They would also need to kind of take it in, and you might need to walk several times before they start to feel more comfortable in their own skin as they're walking down the street, and it's not that new,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point
Just
too, right?
helps.
That'd be you're going to be out walking them in a totally different neighborhood, right? Like I'm sure there's some transition time for them to figure out where am I? What's going on here? Oh, there's all these new smells here, right?
Totally.
You
Oh
know?
yeah. And when dogs are stressed out, they may not drink right away. They may not eat the same for a few days until things sort of, get a little bit less stressful for them and as they adjust. So you may also notice that the dog is not going to potty the same way as before. And there's that, okay, like they need to go poo. I know they need to go number two. Why are they not going? Well, that's it's very closely tied with their comfort level. So if they're comfortable in an environment, they will go a lot faster and you won't have to spend as much time. But especially in the beginning, it's definitely beneficial to take them out on a leash, take your time, walk around, really let them take it all in and not force them to do it either. So yeah, it's a big one. Like there are a lot of people that will bring their dog in for boarding, and we tell them right up front, the first day, don't be surprised if they don't eat. It's a new environment. You just left them alone. Even though we take our time and introduce them and we have them come in for a day or two or more, depending on how shy the dog is, or how insecure and uncomfortable they are, we'll ask them to bring them more or less depending on the dog's vibe and how easily adjustable they are. And we do tell them, and once you leave them, they don't know what's happening, and they might not eat the first day, but usually by the second day, because we work with them, we do a lot of walking, we play with them, we encourage them to move and do something. By the time it's time for the next meal, usually they eat. But the same thing can happen at home in a new environment, right? It's no
Yeah,
difference.
that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. I never thought of that. The other thing I never thought of that
Hmm.
you had mentioned, and I think it's a good topic to talk about, is like when you're putting the house for sale and then you're going to have showings, like what do you suggest that people do with their dog? I don't think it's really a good idea to
That's
have a dog loose, like probably should take it out or
no.
trade it or something, right? Because you just never know, the dog could bolt, whatever. Who knows how a dog's going to react to
Absolutely.
strangers in their house too, even if they're a pretty friendly dog, right?
Absolutely. Like, so I have two Rottweilers and a Bichon. And if I put them in a crate and there was a showing and a stranger, doesn't matter who it is, came into our room where the crate is located, one of my dogs will look at you and will growl the meanest growl ever and probably scare you just from walking in. Now, yeah, she's in a crate, but that will cause, like, she's obviously feeling like she needs to tell you, who are you and why are you here? Now, she's the friendliest dog ever. If I let her out of the crate, she will probably be the first one to jump to you and ask you to pet her and, give you a lick if she could. But inside the crate, different story. She wants to feel like she's, protected and she's protecting the house. Very different vibe. So, would I let her be outside of the crate when people come in that are strangers? No, absolutely not, because not everyone feels comfortable with a dog around. So, when they're coming to see a house, they may not feel comfortable with a small dog or a large dog. It doesn't matter. They may be allergic. So that might already set them on the wrong tone, with seeing the house and having
Yeah.
an allergic reaction. Not a good thing. And three, yes, the risk of them, again, someone who's not mindful of the door opening and closing may not realize that they left the door open and there goes Fluffy out the door. So why worry about that? That's just one more thing to be concerned about. So you either make arrangements to take your dog out of the house during the requested time for the showing, if you have the ability to. But if you don't, I would suggest, well, either a neighbor or a friend. And if that's not an option, put your dog in a dog daycare if your dog is dog friendly. But for that, you need to take the time to set them up for success. So if you take them out, a 4-year-old dog that's never been in dog daycare, they may be social, they may be friendly, but they might only be used to meeting 1, 2, 5 dogs maybe on a walk. It's very different going into a room full of dogs with 20 to 30, some places have more, dogs that they don't know and expect them to be totally fine. Some
Yeah.
dogs, very small number, would do okay, but usually as they get older, they a little more settled in their ways. And what
Yeah.
they've been exposed to is very different, right? So plan ahead of time. Don't just plop them into a daycare and think they'll, sink or swim. That's not fair to anyone. And
Yeah.
no different than introducing a child to daycare. You kind of go a little bit, like one day, just a shorter time frame, the next day, maybe a little bit longer until your child feels comfortable, right? Same thing with dogs. Start ahead of time. Start maybe with just a short visit, see how they do, and then build up to it. So if you know you need them to stay for a couple of days or a little more often, depending on how many showings and how long the house has been on the market, plan ahead and have that place set up so you can call a day before and go, can my dog come to daycare tomorrow? I have a showing
Yeah.
request. And you bring them in for the day. And that way you have the flexibility for however many showings are getting requested for that day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Makes life a
surprised, like
little easier.
I've had we've had incidents where people have said, like, don't go into a certain room because there's a dog in there. People go in anyway. So I'm always surprised at what people do. But I think I don't, even if you're a dog person, like, you just don't know what a dog is going to do in their own territory and a complete stranger coming in, right? You just don't know what they're going to do ever. So I think it's
Ever.
yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. Most people, like we tell clients, take the dog out, like go out for a walk, go in the car, whatever, do something, go sit in the backyard if it's nice out, you know, at least go sit outside, take the dog out of the house. And
Yes.
most people do, because you're right, like not everybody's a dog person, right? Not and I mean, I've had dogs all my life, but I would still be afraid if I went in a house and there was a large dog there, you know? So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
pretty interesting. But I guess it's probably also kind of confusing for the dog, even if you're having showings and you're taking them out, like when they come back, I would assume that they would be like, there's different smells here, right? Like,
Yeah.
can they pick up on that?
Well, they do. I mean,
Yeah,
they do, but I mean, at the end of the day, you've had other people go in and out of
yeah,
the house before, whether it was a repairman or, a painter or whatever. So, I mean, it's not the end of the world. They move on very quickly because there's not a person physically there that they don't know.
right,
And even
yeah,
then, you know your dog better than anyone. So, like some dogs, no problem with anyone coming and going. They're very comfortable with anyone. And I mean, they'll let you in if they could,
right,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
so, but others, not so much. And they're a
yeah,
little bit more weary and they may act completely different when the owner is not around than when the owner is there. So why take that chance?
yeah,
And ideally, no one knows what their dog is going to behave like when you're not there, because most people are there when they introduce their dog to someone or when someone comes into the house as their guest. When you're not there, it'd be a completely different story, right?
yeah,
And
for sure. Yeah,
yeah, and you want them to be able to go into the house. You're buying a house that's a million plus or however much. You want to be able to see the house that you're buying, including the room that someone told you
yes. Don't go
don't
in.
go in
There's a
there.
dog. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
But there's
well,
so many people have dogs these days, right? Like I have to think that the
oh,
percentage of people who have dogs is way higher than ever. And the number of
yes.
dogs, like I'm surprised, like you have 3 dogs. I'm surprised at the number of people I know who have 2, 3, 4 dogs. Shocking to me.
Absolutely.
Shocking to me. That's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
COVID has actually increased the number of dogs like tenfold, to a
Wow.
point that, vets were overwhelmed. People just kept, saying they want a dog because they were spending more time at home, right? When now things kind of are halfway like shifted back where a lot of people are going back to the office, not at home as much. So you have now a situation of influx of dogs, and now you got to figure out what to do with those dogs when you're not there and there is a
Yeah.
showing. So it complicates things a little bit for
Yeah,
some
for
people.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. So let's say I just want to kind of wrap up in a few minutes, but what would you say are, let's get some top 3 things. So what would be the top 3 things to do before you put your house for sale if you have a dog?
I would plan ahead of time who would be watching my dog on showing days, if I'm able to take him out or not. That's definitely an important one. For me, I wouldn't want just any stranger having access to my dog while I'm not there. Especially if I'm training my dog and my dog is used to certain things. I don't want a stranger to come in and potentially try to pet them or reward them or give them maybe some treats that I'm not okay with them giving, or who knows what. You'll be surprised. Two, I would say the packing for sure, especially if you have a dog that's a little bit of a nervous Nelly and needs more time to adjust. Then take the prevention ahead of time and work on it first before surprising them with like 50 boxes in the house. Um, and three, I would say um, definitely the introducing them to the house properly, because that can make your life so much easier in terms of them adjusting and going potty faster and just feeling comfortable in general.
Yeah.
But again, we're talking about the dogs that are a little bit more nervous than others who
Yeah.
do need that time. Yeah.
Makes sense. I think if you're prepared and you like you've said, like we know our dogs, right? Like we know whether our dog is the type of dog that gets nervous around different things. And so if you know that, then there's preventative measures you can take to make sure that everything goes smooth. Because the worst thing is if you move and then it's just like it causes it can cause, like you said, so many more issues down the road. Like I would never have even thought of that. The fact that, my dog runs into the house and then slips or hits himself somewhere, and now all of a sudden I've got this issue and I have no idea why. Because I don't even think I would put those two things together and understand that that's what just happened, right? So you don't
Absolutely.
know what the long-term implications of what's happening are. So I think
Oh
that's
yeah.
that I would not have known for sure. That's important.
Yeah. If it was something that stressed them out, they remember, they don't forget.
Yeah.
And sometimes they need the help to sort of move out of that and move forward and see, okay, like, yes, you slipped over this area, but look, we can still walk through the area, nothing bad happens. But it takes a little bit more work than a dog that was just introduced on a leash and was let through the house leisurely, go sniff, smell, get comfortable on your own terms without going into this frenzy of running from, one area to the next. And which is a lot more chaotic, right? Like even as I'm describing it, I feel the chaos about it
I
too,
know, me too.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I know when I mentioned this to you before, that when I moved from the house I was in to this house, like it was, I mentioned that the dog was having accidents on the carpet, but she actually loved this house. Like the minute she got here, it was like she felt home. And I got her as a rescue. She was over. She was, probably 6 or 7 years old at that time. But now the house that I lived in before this, she never settled in that house. Never. She was always out of sorts there. And when we got here, it was like
Mm,
almost immediate that she just, there must have been something in her background that was
mhm,
familiar to her around here. Mind you, it's a lot more
mhm,
open here than it was where I was, but and everything scared her. So so it can work
mhm.
both ways, right? Like it could work the opposite way.
Absolutely.
If I had brought her home here and then I moved, not even thinking anything of it, maybe I would have moved and realized that, oh my goodness, like this is going to take some work. And
Yeah,
it's take work. But the good news is it's all doable if you know what you're working with, then it's totally doable to address all those issues, right?
absolutely. I'd say the biggest takeaway from once you're in the new home would be that this is now a new environment, and you now also have the opportunity to work on whatever it is that you need to work on that maybe wasn't established in the previous house. So a lot of people complain about the dog is dashing out the door or jumping on the counter, jumping on people, etc. And for example, when they bring them to our dog daycare, they don't do any of those behaviors here. And it'll be like, how come they're not jumping on you? There's food on the counter that we're preparing for dogs, and one of the dogs will walk by and say, how come they're not trying to jump at the counter to steal the food? I say, because one, we prevent it obviously ahead of time. We don't want anybody getting anything that they shouldn't be getting, but also we work on it right from the get-go to establish those rules and boundaries of, yes, this is okay, you can walk through this area, but no, that's when you try to jump up at me, or there's a little bit more that goes into it, and I lead them in with a leash initially so I can establish those boundaries and make my life easier in the long run, which then means the dog is having a blast without having to me for me to worry about them counter surfing or jumping on a person,
Yeah.
and it just makes it so much more easy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that would be the last takeaway for sure.
Yeah, amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for doing this, Dee. So I
Welcome.
will what I'll do is in this video we can put in like the areas that you work. So you're in Markham Stouffville area.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm
so
Markham Stovall,
yeah. And so
Aurora.
people are looking, especially if you want to move and you have a dog and you're concerned. I mean, I think it'd be the perfect opportunity to call you because you could give tips on how to do this.
Absolutely.
And help with the moving as well, help with the selling or the buying as well process. So I'll add
Yeah,
that in with your phone number and your email if anyone wants to get a hold of you, just to, if they have tips or whatever. Um,
yeah.
I think that'd
Happy to
be great.
help.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this
Thank
with
you.
me. And
Thank you for having
maybe at
me.
some point we'll do a follow-up with a furry creature.
Should
When
have
they
brought one of them at least here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would bring mine,
Yeah.
but we still haven't got to
Yeah.
the point where she's like, off limits when I'm so anyway, it's all good.
Work is work.
Awesome. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Dee. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sandy.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
You too.